welcome to another episode of the Snowy's Camping Show. How are you, Ben?
I'm good, thank you.
Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to the podcast, whether that be through YouTube or Spotify or your favourite podcast app, and also jump onto the Facebook group Snowy's Camping Banter and join in the conversation, because that's where also our awesome listeners post questions and give us ideas for episodes, which means you will find a stubby cooler and a Snowy sticker in the post to you if your suggestion is awesome.
Well,
no, not awesome, but also if it's not one we've done before or things like that as well. Now, I've just pulled today's question out of, this is
a long one. I put this one in there. I thought about shortening it, but then I thought, no, I'm just going to leave the whole thing in there.
All right,
so bear with us, grab a cup of tea while Lauren reads the question out.
So this one is from Natalie from Facebook. Thanks, Natalie, for this question. Is it normal, in inverted commas, for your tent to get flooded? I made the rash decision to throw away my whole tent because I was angry it let water in. In hindsight, that amount of rain is not that frequent, so I probably should have kept it. In brackets, she's mentioned here it was a secondhand tent and not in great nick, but still. Should we expect that tents will let some water in intense rain? Or should a tent fully prevent water ingress? What's a good floor type to look for when purchasing a tent? We also sleep on Exped Duromats on the floor. Is it okay to just sleep in a few centimetres of water? A few centimetres of water. Put a pin in that one. And just dry mats out at the next opportunity.
I'm going to put the nail in a few of those things. Firstly, I think, can I just read the start? It says, is it normal for your tent to get flooded? No. No, your tent should not be flooded.
Also, listen, we recently did an episode on waterhead ratings and waterproofing of fabrics and stuff. So listen to that one as well, because some of this stuff might be covered, but there's some other stuff here.
Probably three things. Firstly, no, your tent shouldn't get flooded.
No, your tent shouldn't get flooded.
Secondly, if it's secondhand, have a listen to our previous episodes about that fabric and waterhead rating, because if the fabric has deteriorated, then it could just be that it's leaking and it's beyond repair. Yeah. And lastly, I wouldn't be sleeping in a few centimetres of water. You can dry the mats out after. That's not a problem. If you haven't got water inside the mat, you've just got it on the outside, it can dry out. But a few centimetres of water, something's not right. Something's
gone wrong.
That's not camping. But it is somewhat normal that you might experience some water coming into a tent in certain conditions. It shouldn't happen all the time. And there are multiple reasons we can do this. First one that usually we cover off on every time when people say my tent's leaking.
Condensation.
And we've done an episode on this. I haven't got the episode number.
And it's also my first thought, because I literally had an email from a customer recently who was using an RV tent, right? Oz10 RV tent, excellent tents. We love them. Also single skin canvas, notorious for condensation. It's just there are some tent models just purely by design, they're notorious for condensation, and it just can't be avoided in certain environmental conditions. We have done an episode. What episode is it?
Episode 9.
Episode 9 on condensation specifically. So go back there and have a listen to that if you want. But he was very, very upset, understandably, because he'd been on this trip and he just was like, the whole tent was saturated. Every single photo that he sent was condensation. Of course, we're having the tent back. We're going to chuck it up out the back, drench it with a hose, stand there for ages, check it all out. But there was not a single photo that indicated anything other than condensation. However, it was covered. And when I say covered, I mean side to side, top to bottom, entire inside, moisture dripping and running down onto the floor, creating puddles.
And I think
not a leak. Unfortunately not. It's just.
Pretty sure I've said that in this condensation episode, because I put my family through a real field test and slept in an RV5 with all the vents done up, 4 of us in there overnight on a cold night. Woke up the next day, literally what you said. Mm-hmm. As soon as the tent starts to move, that water starts to the surface tension or whatever breaks and it starts to run down, hits that pole across the center and drops right on top of you. Yeah. Heaps of water. Like you would saturate a large microfiber towel drying it out. Yeah. Next night, open up some vents to let some of that hot air out. little bit of condensation that dries up within half hour of the sun coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Condensation is probably for well over 50% of the issues.
Yeah.
What is causing water inside your tent?
I would say close to 95% of contact we get from customers about a tent leaking is it's not leaking.
And it can be on the floor as well, because it might be dripping down the side and underneath your mat, and that's when you lift your mat and you go, oh, we're sleeping in water. Where does that come from? Once again, condensation could also be condensation from the ground up.
Yeah.
If the mat's warm through and you're on cold ground, there's a spot there. It's science.
Mm-hmm.
Watch the episode. We kind of it's physics. It's just condensation happens. Ventilation. Ventilate your tent first. If you ventilated your tent, you'll reduce condensation. But a leak from rain it'll be coming from an obvious spot. There'll be an obvious drip, consistent drip coming from a spot. There won't be water on the inside. It's just
correct.
A spot somewhere where it's come through from the outside,
If
not
the
a sheet
inside
of
of your
water.
material, if the inside of your tent is covered in a fine water or fine water beadings or whatever, then that's not a leak. That's almost 100% of the time a dead giveaway that you're dealing with condensation.
Yep.
If the inside of your tent is dry and somewhere along the seam line you're getting drips of water, that's what we're talking about is a leak.
Yep. And that can happen, and that's fixable.
Yeah.
If it's just a leak, seam grip or something, even sometimes a new tent might have that. There's heaps of seams in a tent. They put seam tape all over it. It shouldn't leak. Sometimes it happens, even to the best of them.
Yeah.
Not often, but sometimes it does. And you can, if you've got a new tent and that's happening, then let us know. It's a warranty.
100%.
We'll fix it up. You can also just fix it at home.
Yeah.
We'll probably also offer the option of just sending you a tube of seam grip and say, put a dab on there.
Yeah.
And seam grip seals anything.
Yeah, totally.
But it's at a high level answer, Natalie, no, your tent shouldn't leak. Your tent potentially leaked because it was old, hard to say without seeing it. But if you've set a waterproof tent up and it's got a water head rating above 1,000 mil and it rains, and I talk just rain coming down, not wind-driven sideways rain, just rain coming down. You've set the tent up properly. You've used guy ropes. The fabric's taut.
It's nice and tight, good tension.
It should be, you shouldn't in that instance get water inside. It should be waterproof.
Yeah.
If you start to get terrible winds and the rain starts coming in sideways, in which instance you can start to get the rain not just running downwards on the fly, but maybe starting to go up, maybe up underneath the bottom because the wind's blowing water everywhere. You can get some water, some spray inside the tent in those instances. It's just how it is. There's
force of nature.
It is. You could stop it by creating completely sealed tent so that no water can come in at all, but then you're just going to have condensation. So you kind of can't have your cake and eat it too there, right? There's vents in the top that are designed to stop water from going in when it's coming straight down onto the fly. But if that wind-driven rain's strong enough and it's blowing water back up the fly, it might go in the vent. Now, some good quality tents will put a little ridge there to try and direct the water away. So good brands do put things in place to try and stop that from happening. But it can still happen. You can still get a little bit of water in there, but it shouldn't be that you're sleeping in centimetres of water. If you're sleeping in centimetres of water.
If you're sleeping in centimetres of water, your tent's failed in some way.
Yep.
I mean, if we're talking about there's a little puddle in the corner that's a couple of centimetres deep because maybe you're camping on grass and there's a divot there and there's like an opportunity for a pooling and it's in that one small section and it's most likely come from condensation, that's another thing. But if your floor is consistently got a couple of centimetres of water in it, to me that suggests it's actually more a failure of the floor itself than it is because, even in the situation that Benji is talking about in super wild weather and rain's coming from all different directions and it's wind driven and whatever, the fly is still, for the most part, going to do its job, right? There's just going to be these small areas there that will be potentially vulnerable in those conditions. I would not have thought that it would have been enough to create a pool of water in the bottom of the tent though, even if it was that crazy. So to me, it sounds a little bit more like in that particular circumstance, the flooring of the tent itself has failed and you're getting moisture from the ground leaking up through that material. Now you have mentioned what's a good floor type to look at for purchasing a tent. That is a good question. I probably do want to sort of lead off with, don't forget that for the last 40 plus years, tent floors have mostly been made of either straight up canvas or woven polyethylene tarp material, just like crinkly stuff, just like a blue tarp that you cover your trailer with. The floor of a tent has been like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at tents these days and they're silicone covered or they're PVC coated or they're whatever, don't forget that for decades prior to this, people have been perfectly camping happy and dry with a tarp floor.
Sometimes not even a floor. The old style tents just came down the sides and you slept on the ground.
And do you remember, like I remember when being a kid, you're having to like dig the trench around the base of your tent.
So the tent,
the water like come off the fly and
the old patrol tents,
So basically a tent that has a floor that's on the market that you can buy is going to be fine.
And it'll be designed for what the tent's designed for. So the floor I really like, so let me go to the extreme level. I've had an RV5 in terrible rain, sitting in 2 inches of water. I had to move it.
Yeah.
It was like.
Was that the green ant story?
That was the green ant story. Yeah. And it didn't leak. That's fine. That's heavy duty PVC floor.
PVC, yeah.
So you could arguably say that's the best tent floor. You go and put that in a lightweight tent, it's just not going to work. It's too heavy.
Yeah.
So a lightweight tent then uses a polyester or a
seal nylon
or something like that. Usually with a 5,000 plus waterhead, because the floor actually needs a higher waterhead. See our last episode about that. Floor needs a higher waterhead than the fly. Because it also needs to pack up into a small bag and go in a backpack.
Yeah.
The polyethylene you talk about is probably the most versatile and affordable and durable tent floors out there. Best balance of everything, but it's noisy as hell to walk on.
Yeah.
It's all crinkly and it doesn't feel very nice, but it does the job. I think a good balance for family camping tents is a PVC coated polyoxide nylon that they've got, which is a woven nylon or polyester. And then it's got this PVC coating on top, like a rubbery sort of coating on top, and it doesn't have that crinkly feel. It kind of has this
more of like a soft floor feel.
It's got a bit of a softer floor. Yeah, and it feels nice and durable. I think that's a really good tent, but it's bulkier, not as bulky as just PVC, but not as lightweight as just nylon, but kind of has that balance in the middle. But it's on the more expensive tents.
Trying to think. Was it the RV tent or was it the Black Wolf Turbo tent that did a flooring for a while and then they changed the flooring back to what they were doing before because...
Oh, no, they didn't change. Black Wolf Turbo's canvas range had a heavy-duty silver PVC floor. It was rock solid, but it was so bulky. It was really heavy to pack up.
And it's really difficult to pack your tent back up.
Hard to roll it up, yeah. And if it was cold, it was even harder because it goes really stiff. So they've moved to a heavy-duty...
But they changed it though, didn't they?
They did change it.
They changed it because it was just like great floor, but so not practical.
Just over the top, yeah. So now they use it the same as they use in their light series, maybe a little bit heavier, but it's a really heavy duty floor, which makes perfect sense. It's much easier to roll up. And if you use a ground sheet or something under it anyway, you're protecting that floor and you get plenty of life out of it. So that PVC floor is somewhat overkill in many cases. But yeah, they made it move in their canvas tents to use a lighter weight floor. So there's no best floor. Most tents will be made with the best floor for what that tent's designed for at the price you're paying for that tent.
Yeah.
If you want something heavier duty, it's going to be heavier. It's going to cost you more. It's going to last you longer, but you also paid for that extra life. So
it's also probably worth mentioning that some tent brands don't actually specify a waterhead rating for the floor, and that's not because it's not waterproof. It just means because it's like a piece of PVC material that is waterproof, so testing it for a waterhead rating is relevant.
It's impermeable. Yeah, so PVC is impermeable. I'm pretty sure even though it looks woven, that polyethylene I think is classed as impermeable. So water just you can't get through that. So there's no point in testing it because the waterhead's going to be here to the
1
moon.
billion mils.
Yeah, it probably comes down to tear strength of the pressure of the water before the fabric just tears rather than leaks. So,
but in the instance of sort of potentially what you're talking about there is it may have been a tent that, as you've mentioned, not in great nick. It could have just had some really heavy use and you don't know what campgrounds or environmental conditions they've been camping in. If they're constantly pitching, going to, a lot of national parks now, their campsites are that compact not gypsum because it's white. It's like that gravelly sandstoney sort of top on like a compact limestone, whatever. That's going to be super abrasive. So if they're camping on tent sites like that or camping out in the bush or the desert where it's very abrasive underneath, the tent floor over time with constant walking back and forth over it, maybe stretches, whatever, you could just have areas on the floor of the tent there that the waterproofing is just worn away with time. And unfortunately then that's created a wicking point. And you mentioned in your question as well, Natalie, about something about the that amount of rain is not that frequent. So it sounds to me that you've been camping and it was hectic conditions, like an unprecedented amount of rain. You weren't 100% sure about the provenance of the tent, I guess is the right word for it. Potentially the floor has been compromised, which might not be an issue in majority of camping situations, but in a scenario where there's a lot of rain, a lot of groundwater, that's how I can see you just a perfect combination of factors ending up with a few centimetres of water in the bottom of your tent. As much as it sucks.
As we covered in our last episode, if that tent fabric has degraded, it's probably
nothing you can do.
Nothing. You use it in fine weather, but otherwise it's going to keep leaking. So to summarise, Natalie, no, it's not normal for your tent to get flooded. You've said here, should a tent fully prevent water ingress? I wouldn't say ever fully. In most scenarios, you should stay dry. There are some scenarios where you might get a bit of water in there.
It's probably worth saying the material itself is waterproof. However, there is design, like you say, the vents, the fly, the gap between the bottom of the fly and the ground, and wind and zippers on the windows, and there are elements to the design that aren't potentially Loctite.
But I think probably, even though it sounds like you had pretty bad weather, I would say your tent may have leaked a little, but it sounds like it was old and leaked more than you should expect a tent to, because you never know when you're going to get caught out in weather. So you at least want to know your tent's going to keep you dry for 80-90% of the time. And there's this small percentage that we might get caught out in that we know that these are the limitations and we might get a bit of water in there. So we'll make some considerations on how we set it up, park a vehicle in a certain spot or whatever to try and mitigate that. And you can sleep in a few centimetres of water on your mat if you like. Depends on what mat it is, but for the most part, should be fine if a mat gets wet. Dry it out afterwards, store it dry, but don't, because it doesn't sound like much fun.
It's not, don't go out looking for it to happen. But if it does happen on a very random occasion, then it's, there's no dramas there.
I want to know a bit more about this. If this all happened on the same episode, I'd love to hear the story.
You mean same camping trip?
The same camping trip?
Yeah, totally.
Same camping trip. Is this all one story? Like we got this tent, we went out, it rained, there was flooding, we slept in 2 centimetres of water.
I'm just imagining this whole sentence, I threw my whole tent away because I was angry. Yeah. I can imagine that in my mind's eye, just chucking it in this huge big tent. Because stupid tent. Yeah, totally. I get it. Look, I don't think it was necessarily a rash decision per se, but maybe a decision that you could have made after a conversation with some people just to be double sure, especially, maybe, I don't know how much you paid for it either.
But look, it's going to leak. I think every time you go camping in that, you're going to think, I hope it doesn't rain because we're going to get wet.
Yeah, so I think you made the right decision ultimately. Yeah. I would, based on all the information that you've provided here, I would have done the same.
Yeah. And then you've come to the right people to ask for advice. Give us a call for a new one. We'll help you out.
Totally.
All right, I hope that's answered your question, Natalie. Thanks, though. It was a long question. I tried to strip it down. I'm glad I left all the detail in there. It's good. It was a good chat.
I love stories like this. Obviously not for you, Natalie. It would have been but you've got the memories, right? The story. You've got the story and the memories, and that's what camping's all about.
And it's only the people who are there who know about it. So you can, make it up.
You can say whatever you want about it.
Exaggerate a little bit here and there.
Totally.
No one's going to be able to say otherwise.
Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. We'll see you again next episode.
See you next time.
Have a great week. See ya.